Once again, how many times, Julia, have we talked about this? And well, let's try and unpick this. About every 2 minutes yesterday, I was getting a message from really worried travellers saying, "Look, we're booked to travel to Spain or maybe one of the high infection Greek islands. We cannot possibly afford hotel quarantine, and we're really worrying about this amber watch list. Should we cancel our trip?" And I was saying, no, this is a complete joke. It's dreamed up presumably by somebody who wants to scare people into worrying that they are going to end up in Isolation Row on Heathrow's north side in one of those hotels, paying £1,750 for accommodation. But of course, the system simply couldn't cope, and there's never any intention of doing that. However, whoever's idea it was, if the idea was to destabilize confidence, if it was to frighten people off holidays in Spain, well, it's worked an absolute treat already, even though it's now been shelved.
Well, exactly, because a lot of people, they were having to make their plans. Look, most people are making their holiday plans in January, for goodness sake, ahead of summer holidays. Lots of people booked in Britain anyway. They didn't have the option of saying, oh, OK, well, we'll cancel that and we'll go on holiday abroad because we're not sure. But of course, a lot of the places that were being mooted for this amber watch list, bearing in mind we were told it was a traffic light system. Traffic light. So the reason we use the term traffic light is it's three options. It's green, amber and red. And then we had this green watch list almost immediately. I went to Mallorca and it was on green watch list. And then there was that threat of it going back into amber, which it then did. And then we had the amber plus, completely randomly introduced just for France at short notice. And then this, as you say, this prospect of an amber watch list, where that you go there, but at any point it could move to red at any time. The reality is, lots of people just, they were going to lots of the countries like Spain, like Greece and Italy, that were options to go on the amber list because they couldn't go to France because it was an amber plus. I know so many people who've just been cancelling moving holidays where they can or waiting to book somewhere that they thought was safe and then having it scuppered. But surely the reality of, what was it? A million people are supposed to be in France even now. The prospect of finding hotel spaces for all the people coming back from Spain or Greece, give me a break. There aren't enough hotel spaces in near enough airports. That was never going to happen. The reason that was just a threat from the government, and it was never actually really seriously looked at, surely.
Oh no, but it didn't need to be. It simply needed to be there as a threat. And if you talk about it widely, well, it was obviously widely discussed, leaked to friendly newspapers, then people are going to get the jitters. And my goodness, they did. Absolutely heartbreaking. People who booked trips just saying we cannot possibly afford to go, we're cancelling the whole thing, we're losing hundreds of pounds. And yes, in terms of France, meanwhile, well, that is just so far off the scale. The Office for National Statistics, not normally getting involved in squabbles, wrote a very formal reprimand to the Joint Biosecurity Centre saying you've got to show you're working. This is terrible.
Basically,
people need to understand.
What stats on COVID and new variants were you using to justify this? And that's been this ongoing issue about was it actually was it this island of Reunion, many thousands of miles away in the Indian Ocean, that actually had this high beta variant and not France? And the argument, people could have travelled from Reunion to France. Well, yeah, then you'd have had to put that on your form, and that would have counted as a red list entry anyway. So within 14 days. So, there was obviously a massive mess up by the government on that front. We know the Transport Secretary wasn't even in the room. What do you make of we're seeing now very public information. We've got, Rishi Sunak's letter to Boris Johnson in the Sunday papers. The Transport Secretary making clear he wasn't in the room when that decision on the France amber list was amber plus list was put in. There is now, I think, very public hostility and opposition now, not just from backbenchers, but even from cabinet and other ministers to a lot of these policies. The fact that people are speaking out, do you think that shows they are more confident they are going to win on this? Or do you think there's an element where actually it's desperation and people are getting, MPs and ministers are getting really worried that actually people who said, we're all terribly afraid, we like lots of restrictions, when they decided they wanted to go on a holiday, are now getting jolly cross and actually it's going to be hitting them in the polls?
Yes, that's exactly right. That last point. I mean, for many, many months, you and I, Julia, who've been very, very pro-travel, have been in a minority. And
Yeah.
most talk listeners, you would ask them, and about 60, 70% say, no, keep the borders closed. Now it's August. Understandably, and not criticizing anybody here, lots of people are thinking,
I
hang
am.
on, no, it would be
I
would be
am.
lovely to have a holiday, and therefore the polls have swung in favour of more travel opportunities, of course, backed by the fantastic NHS vaccine rollout. And so, well, what a surprise! You instead of Rishi popping round from number 11 to number 10 and having a quick
He
word,
could
which
have
he could
just
have done
banged on
very
the wall,
discreetly.
couldn't he?
Yes, he writes a big long letter and gets the Sunday Times to put it on their front page. So what we're seeing now is our holidays are pawns in the middle of this power struggle at the top of government. So it's not doing anybody any great credit. However, if one thing that comes out of this is that we do revert to a simple system, that would be good. I counted, you gave me 5 traffic lights. Can I give you another one? Super green, and that's Ireland. Ireland,
You're
mustn't
fine.
forget
You could go
Ireland.
to Ireland. Oh yeah. By the way,
only
we
foreign
are
country.
convinced that Simon Calder is being paid by the Irish Tourism Board because he always brings up Ireland.
Well, no, it is. It's the one country you can go to without testing or quarantine in either direction if
Yeah.
you're lucky enough to be double vaccinated. May there be many, many
Yeah.
more,
Okay.
and may we get those 17 new countries on
Well,
the green list
well,
on
that's
Thursday.
it. We're hoping to have those 17 new countries. A lot of those will be countries, so frankly, are not necessarily places that are high on the travel options for most people. What we really need is, Italy. You've still got 5-day quarantine to get into Italy, so that's not actually that much use unless people are planning. Someone's got a house there and they're planning to stay there for 2 months. But you are really looking at Greece, massive destination. Spain, the biggest single destination. America's still off the cards for us, although Americans can come here. Seems reasonable, not. And getting France off. There it seems to be very, very, very strong news that, we're going to keep to just the amber status for Spain and Greece. And Portugal and the like, but France likely to go back onto that amber list as well. The announcement expected on Thursday, could come before. They're not very consistent about when these announcements happen. Ready for next Monday. So could people? I'm asking for myself here. Could people reasonably book a flight for Friday, head off, safe in the knowledge that they won't have to quarantine coming back from France?
Well, look, my strong view is that that particular policy has now been exposed for just being absolute tosh. When you've got people scrabbling around trying to find justifications after the event, and the official government statisticians writing to the government saying, "Come on, sort yourselves out, everybody." I'm 98% confident we'll be back on amber, but I'm not booking anything because I know from bitter experience, you book something and then you regret it. It's terrible news for the travel industry. I want to spend money, but I'm only going to spend it after Grant Shapps has tweeted which countries are on his favoured list, and as soon as that appears, I'll be booking whatever I can as quickly as I can, because obviously the immediate aftermath of a green list of a traffic light change is probably the sort of safest time, because there's limited time for them to change their minds.
Yeah, absolute chaos. Simon Calder, travel editor at The Independent, thank you very much indeed for